Hi, today we're going to talk about APA documentation, and for the most part we'll be using the writer's reference. Just as with the MLA section, there's an APA section. It shares it with CMS, that's Chicago Manual of Style, which is often used in history. So if you're writing a paper for history class, your teacher may ask you to use that, and your instructions are there. But we're going to do APA, and so we'll be looking mainly at the writer's reference. Right now, we'll only be doing a few kinds of sources, and that's true for a lot of your college writing, at least in your lower levels. As you move into your discipline or field, though, you'll find you're working with more technical sources, and it will be important for you to get an APA publication style guide or hang on to your writer's reference. Make sure it's the has the most recent edition of APA. So let's start by taking a look. Of course, in writing down the basics, I do have basic APA documentation information, and that will get you through a lot of just really the basics, but the writer's reference does have more of the specifics. So just like with MLA, it has the directory to in-text citation models. So the first place you go is to that, and just understanding the basics of these, you can get through most anything. And of course, there are more technicalities. APA has how we treat 2 authors, 3 authors, 6 authors. You want to be familiar with those again, so when that happens, you look and say, oh, is there something special? If so, you go look it up, do it like it says. Now, what APA is it's a basic author, date, location model of in-text citation. Remember, MLA was just author and location. Once we mentioned the author's name, all we had to put in was the page numbers or sections or paragraphs if we had some old school document, but really it comes down to page numbers and sections. With APA, they add one more thing. They add the date. And that date is important in the sciences because think about it this way. Do you want your doctor educated based on writings from, say, 500, 1,000 years ago, where they decided to slit a vein because they'd get all that bad blood out of you? Or would you rather your doctor be using information that is more recent? And that's just one example, but the sciences is really about date. It does not mean in a paper you couldn't use an older source as foundational or comparing it, how treatment worked, or saying something, here's something that's been successful for a long time. But APA does emphasize that date, so you should always be thoughtful about it in any of your writing. So this is what you remember. Author, date, location, 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 author, date, location. I really think it should be said this way. Author, date, location, author, date, location, author, date, location, author, date, location. And this is how English teachers throw signs. Author, date, location. So let's check it out, see what it looks like. The basic format is, of course, pretty simple, and it is going to have our author and date. So ordinarily, introduce it with a signal phrase. Don't forget these. These are important. You won't do it all the time, but you should use it kind of the majority of the time using the author's name. And in APA, it's only the author's last name. That is all we will have in the paper unless you have works by authors with the same last name, in which case we'd look it up. So we're going to have our author's name, last name, in the paper, followed by the year of publication in parentheses. And that's why I say author date. The minute, boom, you put an author's name in there, boom, put that date in there. So this is Krister, and then we have that space, in parentheses, 2003. Author date, Krister 2003, Krister 2003. And if you just remember that as your start, every time you put the author's last name, boom, pop in that date right after it. And then what we'll have at the end is the page number. And so this gives a quote. We end our quote, there's a space, parentheses, P, period, 5, parentheses, and then the period at the end. So just like in MLA, after that in-text citation, that period goes at the end. Now remember, in the MLA overview, I said there's no P in MLA, so we don't put a page number. We'll check it out. APA. So we're going to put that P for page. MLA, we just have the number. So there's our author, Krister, 2003. We've got our sentence with that quote in it, and at the end, we have the parentheses P5. Now, sometimes you may not need to say the author's name. If that's the case, if you just want to say one researcher noted that, and then go along and give it, then we would have author, date, location, all in the parentheses at the end. So if you split them up, you're always going to have author date together, author date, and then you would have your location at the end. If you don't use the author's name, which may happen sometimes but should be the rarer choice, then we'd have author, comma, date, comma, and then the location. Now with the date, the only thing we ever give, with the exception of personal interviews, in the in-text citation is the year. So even if you have, month, day, and year, remember that our in-text citation is that shortcut. Like on the map, we don't put all the words so we can read the map. Here, these are only shortcuts so people read what's in our head and what's in our heart, what we're getting on the paper. So all we need in terms of date is that parentheses, and then we're good to go. And you can see same thing, summary or paraphrase. So remember, if you got it from something, you learned that knowledge from somewhere, whether you use that direct quote or you paraphrase it, put it in your own words, you still need author, date, location. Author, date, location. Author, date, location. I'm working on repetition. All right, so there's that. That's the basics of it. Now, there are some other nuances, like works with two authors. In your text, you put the word and. In the citation, you put the little ampersand. So again, it's good to go through there and just, if you have something with two authors, look it up. This isn't a whole lot of reading, and it's real quick, saves you time in the end, and makes your grade better. All right, if you have an organization as the author, it is the same thing as if we had as in MLA. That is the author. So you may not have a person, but it could be a foundation, a school, a government agency, a company, whatever it is. And so in that case, you just use it as the name. Here's the example they give with the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation, comma, 2004, comma, page 1. So here they have it at the end. Now, if we had it said according to the Henry J. Kaiser Family Foundation, boom, parentheses, date 2004, and then we went on and gave the information, then we'd have P1, page whatever, at the end. So same thing, same thing. One thing about organizations, if they have a familiar abbreviation, for example here, CDC, you can include it in black brackets the first time you do that in-text source citation. And then in later citations, you can just use CDC instead of typing out Centers for Disease Control and Prevention. So that's a nice little shortcut, and again, emphasizes the power of reading through this, even though, I'd rather be reading sci-fi any day than reading citation stuff. I really don't come home and read this. So now, a web source. With a web source, same as any other source, giving the author and year when they're available. Usually a page number is not available, and occasionally you'll find one that lacks an author and a date. So here we can see Hopkin and Tavares, 2004, boom, there's author date, pointed out that, and then we have the quote. And here notice it has weight loss drugs section. And so a lot of websites will have sections. For example, take a look at this one, this Power of Images, and you can see there's history of communication, what are images, the new myths, and it goes on to enumerate those. So those are different sections in the article, and you would just put the type with the major words capitalized, and then section is all in lowercase, comma. So weight loss drug section. That would actually be enough. It does say, APA does tell us, you may also indicate which paragraph under the heading you are referring to. So, for example, here under History of Communication, if we were citing something from here, we could put para, P-A-R-A, period, 2. We could do that, but it says may. Means we don't have to. I'm a big advocate of if you don't have to do it, don't do it. If a teacher wants you to do that, they will tell you that. If you're not sure, if you're working for somebody who's really picky and precise, and that's their, their personality, their mode of things, I would pull this out and say, we don't have to under APA, but would you like that in there? And they'll let you know yes or no. And that's really what it is. So the main thing is, if we don't have page numbers, we use section numbers. Very similar to what we did in MLA. APA just types out the whole word, okay? Of course, if you have a PDF, then you have those page numbers online. So again, that difference between, do we have those stable page numbers, or do we have, is it just a website where you can scroll? So for example, for this writer's reference, we have the actual page numbers in the PDF, and we could use those. So, there's a couple more things with dates, and this is listed under web sources, but this is in general true. When a source does not give a date, use the abbreviation ND, and notice little n period, little d period for no date. And so we would do this in the paper anywhere if we don't have a date. Here's Magnus, comma, ND. Instead of having Magnus, comma, and the year, we've got that ND. So lowercase d period, n period, lowercase d period, then we close our parentheses, period. So that's really key, because you will always have its author, date, location. You will always have author. You will always have date, even if you don't know it. But you put that ND, and it shows. I think of it as no dummy, as in, dear teacher, I am no dummy. There is no date. So whatever helps you remember it, author, date. Location is the one you may not have. If there are sections, give the sections. If there are actual numbered paragraphs in old school documents, and there's not page numbers, use those. So your first, with location, your first choice is always page numbers. If there are stable page numbers, use those. If it doesn't have that, if there are numbered paragraphs, you could use those, but don't count them yourself, okay? If you're just using those, because that's old school documents, so really you can put that one in the back of your head. So really page numbers and then sections. So if there are section headings, use that. And if it is really long and bulky, shorten it up. Remember those in-text, shorten it down to 4 or 5 words or fewer that make sense. Because remember, those in-text citations are just hints to look at the back of the page, so people know what to, the reference page, so people know to look it up. All right, done with that one. How about this? The next thing is, so that is your basics: author, date, location, author, date, location, author, date, location. Every time you write an author's name, put that date in there. There is one exception to that rule, and that's if you've given the author and the date in your paragraph, and, in the paragraph, the same paragraph, you mention the author again, you can skip the date. APA assumes people are smart enough to remember at least for one paragraph what the year is. Next paragraph, you got to put it in again, okay? But if it's in the same paragraph, you don't have to give the, and you put the author's name in your sentence or text. So you did author, date, and then location later. Then you can skip it in that same paragraph. But if you just remember author, date, location, and get them in that way, you're good to go. All right, so now we turn to the references page at the end. And just as with MLA, you look it up. One more thing, in the paper, APA CMS, every kind of paper, quote marks for short titles, right? Your short works, your short stories, plays, articles, essays, a song, an episode of a TV show, those always go in those quotation marks. Major words capitalized, show it's a title. Big things, the whole book, the whole website, the whole movie, the whole video game that you hope takes you longer than 30 minutes to play. Italics. That's where we get those in italics. And that's true in the text of the paper. In the references, APA gets wonky, and I used to like just tick me off and give me high blood pressure and all that. And I was like, why? Just look it up and do it, Kelly. I mean, really, I've got more things to worry about in my life than the fact that APA can't get it consistent. So I'm like, whatever, just do it the way they say. So we want to, again, go through and look at things, see what's there. We're actually going to look at 2 things today. We'll look at a magazine and a journal, and then, an article and a journal on the web, and then a website. Those are your most common. So an article and a journal. And this is from the web. So if you have a journal on the web, this is an article in a journal. We could look at print, but one of the things it says is if an article from a web web or a database has no DOI included after the URL. Now, a DOI is just an identification number that is used in like some magazine and journals. So that's your first choice. If you find that DOI on the article, and if you read and look around very carefully, then use it. If not, you'll be using the web page. Now, with an article from a journal, what we have, as you can see, just like in the MLA section, it shows us author's last name plus initials. So again, in the paper, only last names. On your references page, just last name and initials. So we have last name first, Vargas N, and then Schaefer, comma, MH, and then boom, period after that, 2013 in parentheses, period. And then article title, Diversity in Action, Interpersonal Networks, and the Distribution of Advice. We know titles would generally go in quote marks. Okay, that's what we're going to write in our paper. But on the references page, APA says, look, just write it this way. So we don't put it in quote marks. We also don't capitalize all the major words, which is what we would do in the paper. So it's just diversity is capitalized, diversity in action. Notice we have this colon. So we have a second part of our title, a subtitle, interpersonal networks and the distribution of advice, and the I in interpersonal is capitalized. Then we have the journal title, social science research, the volume and the issue, and notice those are just numbers. There's 42, parentheses 1, close parentheses, so it's volume 42, issue 1. Our page numbers, right there, what pages was it on, and the DOI. And so here, notice this one actually gives us page numbers, so it's probably a PDF or something like that. This one doesn't. We end up with the journal title and then move straight on to retrieved from. Okay, and notice that this says not the whole URL, but the URL for the journal homepage. So what is the homepage of that website? Or of the journal itself. And so that's what we're going to give. And when we look at, say, this article, for example, this is The Power of Images, J. Francis Davis, and it is from the Center for Media Literacy. There are a number of things we can see, though. Notice this right here. It says, this article originally appeared in issue 57 of Media and Values. So that tells us that we have two choices here. We can cite this article and say it was originally in Media and Values, and you can find it on this website. We could do that. We can also cite it just as an article on a website and then kind of skip the Media and Values, because when people go there, they'll read that and they'll have that information. But I think, we also need to know what date it is and things like that. So we're going to look at what that information tells us. Okay, so if we click on this issue 57, we end up right here. And this was published, it's issue 57, and it was published in winter of 1992. And so one of the things that we'd want to get in is that information. So oh, I'm sorry, that's the wrong one. Winter of 1992. Here we go, right there. So what you do is you look for and say, where would I put this stuff in? We have Davis, comma, J, period, F, period, because he is J. Francis Davis. And then also, so we have J. Francis Davis. The next thing we're going to have, period, we're going to have Power of Images, colon, creating the myths of our time. So we'll have the P capitalized in power and C in creating, because remember, in the references page, it's just all lowercase except for that title and subtitle first word. And then the journal. And so here we would put Media and Values, and they do have the ampersand in their title, and so I would write it that way because that is what they prefer to do. Media and journal, media and Values, and here retrieved from. So here we would just give the home page. So we know, it was good to click on that because that tells us, one, when was this published? This was 1992. Okay, and so for our citation, we're just going to have Davis 1992, the title, media and values, and then retrieved from, and all we need to put for retrieved from is the web page here, which would be www.medialit.org. I wouldn't go with reading room, power of images, all of that kind of thing, because I think it's just too much there. I really think it's debatable whether or not you'd have to, so you could do it either way. So we'll have the URL, and that gives us everything we need for that citation. So again, it's look and fill in the box. Let's take a look at a document from a website. And so it says give as many of the following elements as are available: the author's name, publication date, ND if there's no date, title in italics, publisher, URL. If you did have a DOI, you could give that, but generally we're talking about a website, okay? I like to look at these two samples on the next page because they show different things. Here we have Gerber, comma, A period S period, comma, and green, and notice in the references page they use the ampersand, green, comma, D period, P period, and then boom, 2012, end your parentheses, period, and here, this is the name of the web page itself, Field Experiments, Design Analysis, and Interaction. And then it says retrieved from Yale Institution for Social Policy Studies website. Notice in this one below it does that differently. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, period. Here's our parentheses with the date, 2012, comma, December 10, period. Concussion in winter sports. There's the title of the article in italics. And then it just says retrieved from http://www.cd.gov, and it goes on. Now, what's the difference there? Here, Center for Disease Control is the website and also the author. So since we've already said the author's name, all we have to do is say retrieved from, boom. Here, Yale Institution for Social Policy Studies has not yet been mentioned in the citation, so we need to put that in there. And we put that colon after retrieved from Yale Institution for Social Policy Studies website. Boom, that could be a period. So we put that colon in there, and then we paste in that URL. Okay, so that's as easy as that is. For example, here is one of our readings. This is Ads Don't Work That Way by Kevin Smiler. And the website, notice here, is Melting Asphalt. We're not going to put meltingasphalt.com, which is what the URL is. We're going to type the words melting asphalt. Okay, this one doesn't have a date on top. Very often the date will be on the top, on one of the sides. But when we go to the very bottom of the page, or excuse me, the end of the article, we can see this was originally published September 18, 2014. So our citation would look like this. Here we have Smiler, K, and then parentheses, 2014. Oh, what did I forget? Because again, remember, I pretty much updated all the APA ones on the web, comma, September, no, 2014. Yeah, the comma should be there, comma, September, no comma, 18. End your parentheses, period. Ads don't work that way in italics, but let's check our writer's reference. We only need to capitalize the first part in the title, okay? And then retrieved from the Melting Asphalt website, colon, and then there is the URL. Now, if you are turning your papers in print, you want to right-click on them and tell it remove the hyperlink. If you are turning your papers in online, then you can leave that because, once you push a space after you give the URL, it's going to hyperlink it. It turns blue and has the link. If you're turning it in online, sending something online, leave those hyperlinks in. So there's just a little note of format. All right, so that again gives us, it's just fill in the blank and take a look at it. Last couple of things, one about format. This section in the writer's reference talks about title and the page headers. Again, remember, mine shows you how to do it in both the Writing Down the Basics and in the video. This just tells you what to do. Do remember long quotations are indented and set off, so if you have 40 words or more in APA, then you scooch it over. But what I wanted to really show you is the headings. In a paper like we're doing, a short paper, say up to like 5 pages or so, or 3 or 4 for sure, you probably won't use headings. But if you do decide to, headings there's a certain way to do them. So your first level one, in a short paper, you would probably only have first level headings. It's bold and it's centered. Here's the second one. Bold, flush left. Third, indented, text immediately follows. It gives you those examples. So in this paper, and we can see, here you can see that this writer has section headings. I'm not a fan of questions. I think you should not put questions in research papers. You research the answer, give the answer. But we could just make this implications of childhood obesity. And there we go. Notice it does not have introduction. APA book, literally, and I do not paraphrase much, basically says, duh. It's an introduction. Everybody knows that. So you would have your introduction, and then basically what are your kind of subpoints, subparts. You do want to make sure when you have a header that people can read from the end of one paragraph to the next without being, without kind of bumps or jolts, that smooth coherence. So your headers would be like this. You don't want to have headers where just like for every paragraph. If you do that, then you really don't need them because, again, they're not taking place of your transitions. So there's an example of your headers and your headings. I really think that's it. One last thing I do want to show you is the APA Style blog, blog.apastyle.org, and I'll put a link to that in the description. This is the place I go. It is the most helpful place for questions. I have things that aren't addressed in the writer's reference or in the APA book itself, which I have. And the APA book itself is like $16, $18, so it's not the cost of a college textbook, and that's wonderful. But they've got a nice search engine, and they really answer a lot of detailed questions like let's see, alphabetizing like Al, De La. So there's what's a name, 2-part surnames. So like, how do you alphabetize these things? Once in a while you run into things like that are kind of confusing, and they show you how to do that because we'd alphabetize in our references. If you have more than one part, do you include it in all of it in the in-text citation? So that's the kind of thing that the APA blog is just really very helpful with. So I highly recommend the APA blog. Okay. I guess that's pretty much it for an overview, and of course it was longer than I'd really like this to be. I would prefer to be able to do a 5 or 10 minute video and say, there you go, that's all you need for the basics. But APA does have a few more nuances, but remember, sometimes it's easy to get frustrated or upset by it, but just read it and do it. I mean, just give into it. There are bigger things in this world to worry about, right? Worry about what you learn. Worry about the people you know and love. Worry about yourself. Take care of you. Just follow the instructions. That's the key thing. And of course, ask me questions. Don't be afraid to make mistakes. Here's where we make mistakes so I can help you get it right. When you go into that other class and you turn in that paper and you say, do we get to revise? And the teacher says, oh, that's cute. Pat you on the head. No. I had a teacher once, I was telling him, I say that, and she said, no, I tell him not only no, but hell no. So this is the place you're revising, you're workshopping, you're learning how to do it. So when you go in, you present that paper, it's gone through that process before you get to that teacher, and that grade you get is that better grade, that very good grade. There was one other thing I was going to tell you. I'm sure it's vitally important to all of our lives, and I've forgotten. So I guess we'll just have to go on without it. Use your books, ask me questions. That's all I got. Come by and see me. Give me a call. And other than that, have a great day. Cool beans.